presenter today, Robert Rose. For the past 20 years, Robert has been a troublemaker. Yep, those are his words, not mine, but I would agree with him completely. Truth be told, Robert has consulted and advised a significant number of Fortune 500 companies on their marketing strategies and, most importantly, how to become effective storytellers. He also has been leading and managing remote teams for more than 15 years, which in my mind makes him an expert on all the things that I want to understand in today's new working world. So with that said, Robert, I won't waste any more of our people's times. The session is now all yours.
Well, thank you for that, Adam. I really appreciate it. And I have to say, I have to really appreciate all of you for coming today, for dealing with what we're dealing with right, in terms of what we're going through with this virus, and certainly the economy as a result of it. And obviously the move very quickly to remote work as a result of all of that. Yeah, just to reiterate quickly, Adam's housekeeping there, these slides are going to advance automatically. So this is a lean back experience for you. There will be an archive of the event, and we do encourage you to join the conversation on us on social media. And we will follow up for all the questions, certainly, that we don't have answers to today or that we don't have time to get to. So I'm going to turn myself off of video just while we go through the slides so we can focus on the slides and not my ugly mug here. I'll turn it back on for Q&A, of course. And so one of the things that I want you to understand is that, yes, this is a two-part process here. And today what we're going to really focus in on is the beginning and establishment of a remote team. For many of you, this is going to be a new phenomenon. And maybe it's that your company doesn't have a remote work policy, or it does with great exception, or maybe you've actually been starting to consider some of this, but now you're getting pushed really hard into it with this global crisis. So what we're hoping to do today is meant to provide you with a little bit of just helpful tips about how to get started in implementing this new world, this new process that you may find yourself in the best way possible. Part two, which will be on Thursday, will then cover some of the longer term ramifications and sort of ongoing ways that you can manage and get to your team fully engaged and fully productive in this new world environment. So with that said, let's get to it. And let's talk about some of the best practices here. So one of the things that we need to understand is that this is not your older brother's remote work. Of course, remote working has been around for as long as work has been around. What really kind of feels strange and artificial is going into an 8-hour workday into some big glass cube where we all file into this, sort of local, office and get into our cubes. But ironically, when remote work started, this idea of telecommuting, it was due to another sort of global crisis. And that was in 1973. And it was the oil embargo of 1973 and sort of the fuel crisis that struck, was where we got the word gridlock, by the way, is where gridlock started to come in and entered the national conversation. And in short, it was traffic pollution, the price of oil, and all of that was creating this amazingly destructive and, quite frankly, crisis in the nation. And this guy, Jack Niels from NASA, decided he was going to try and solve it. And he basically put out a paper, and he started to introduce this idea of telecommuting. And it wasn't what we thought of when we think of today of remote work. Telecommuting in those days was, of course, pre-internet. And it was really the idea that he wrote in this paper was breaking up offices into satellite offices around a city. And so that people wouldn't have to commute to them. They would all go to their local version of the networked office. And then we would connect those network satellite offices with something of a telecommunications network. And as they said in their publication in 1973, in order to make this work, the jobs of employees was going to have to be redesigned so that they can be self-contained at these locations, or some sufficiently sophisticated telecommunications and information system would have to be developed to help employees act as if they were centrally located. And of course, as we know, both came out to be true. When we think about the personal computing revolution of the 1980s and telecommunications really taking off. So, for example, IBM was one of the leaders in telecommuting in those days. And what they would do is they would go out and install computer systems into the homes of people so that they could actually telecommute. And then, of course, we had the revolution of the internet and specifically streaming media. That was really the advent that really accelerated things and brought this whole idea of telecommuting and working remotely to bear. Now, instead of telecommuting in, we can actually virtually be there, right? So very much like what we're doing today, there's video, there's audio, there's screen sharing, there's all kinds of information sharing. Our presence, video, voice, et cetera, is there. The idea that companies could save money, achieve better productivity, and simply allow the appropriate professionals to do their work how they wanted to has been that real key. But ironically, weirdly, over the last 8 or 9 years or so, the idea of full-time remote work has actually been cooling off quite a bit. Yahoo a few years ago, before they sort of met their demise, sort of became sort of the poster child of saying, no, we're not going to allow fully remote work anymore. We're going to bring everybody in on site. IBM did the same thing back in 2017, sort of cooling off this idea of remote work full-time and bringing everybody to cool offices. And of course, the idea itself that may have been really popular in 1973, the WeWork type of offices, has also cooled off some of this idea of working remotely rather than sort of satellite offices that we may have for the business. But it hasn't gone down in popularity. Employees still want this idea of remote work. In 2015, half of employees in research said, yeah, flexibility to do remote work is the top perk that I really want in my new job. This is especially true for young people who really want to do other things other than identify themselves with perhaps the career that they've chosen. And the demand has been growing and growing and growing for it. And all of this has been coming to a head anyway. But yeah, we all know what happened, of course. And that, of course, is that our friend COVID-19 entered the scene and sort of pushed us all into it. The whole point of this is that today it's different. It's not about flexible hours. It's not about a bit more on your laptop when you get home or checking email on your tablet before you go to bed or getting in early to beat traffic and then jumping online when you get home for a couple hours. This is not that. This is full-time remote team participation and team management. So as virtual leaders managing these remote teams full-time, whether they're going to be full-time freelancers, full-time employees, this is your team. It's just managed in a different way, a remote way. And the point of all this is that we have to acknowledge that whether you're just starting this adventure of remote team management, or you're looking to expand it in your business, or this is brand new for you to be forced into, it's not the same as it was before. Today, March 2020 is different. Even for those remote workers that have been doing this for a while, like me, I've been doing this, as Adam said, for 15 years. This is different. This is different for me. Understand that it's different for you than when we're talking about, the seasoned remote workers or the new remote worker who has never done this before, right? The seasoned remote worker like me, like my team, we did this for years in coffee shops and airports and hotel rooms and all sorts of places. The idea of remote work, but quite frankly, for new people, this is largely new territory for them. So they've architected their lives now, whether it's about habits, tools, behaviors, it's all going to be different based on what they have to do. So in the world we're in right now, we have remote work basically, but it's different. It's in isolation. In many cases, there is no coffee shop. There is no going to the airport. We've got kids and spouses at home, and we've got to find our own isolated places, the bedroom, the basement. I saw one guy who's basically converted his bathroom in his studio apartment into his new office. So add to that this other complication, which is, as business owners or management teams, depending on your sort of purview of the world, we've been resistant to this idea, most of us. We often make assumptions that, yeah, sure, people want to work from home and they're glad to work from home, right? We assume that they would prefer to work remotely in their PJs and barely getting any work done, and they're not. And that's a false assumption. Many of your employees, many of your team members are intimidated by this. They do not want this. They've never done it before. And so they haven't done the homework to figure out their home office setup. They don't have a laptop with Wi-Fi and cell and all of that stuff. They're just starting to figure this out. So with both those scenarios in mind, let me get to 3 best practices that we're starting to see as you start formulating that you're trying to work through. Okay, so the first, establish the new instead of the change. This may be the most important one, and it may, quite frankly, be a little bit esoteric, but I think it's really important, and so I want you to really think it through. The first thing we want to acknowledge as virtual leaders of these remote teams is that we need to establish new rules of productivity for the short term. As my colleague, a remote team member on my team, Kathy McKnight, she likes to say, she says, "Yay, we get to change," said nobody ever. And nobody is really going to want to love and do this, especially right now. So one of the pieces of advice, and it's the reason I make it the first one here, is that for you to position this with your team, with your company, however you're sort of working to position this, is that this is a new approach, not a change to existing workflows. We may indeed go back. We may indeed go back to physical offices. We will most likely go back to physical offices soon. But the new way of working here may remain with us forever, and this is a new approach. In our decade of working with different organizations on workflows, on methodologies, on approaches to team management, and all the things that we do in our work, positioning a new element is a much better way to get people to adopt it faster, want to learn it, and quite frankly, accept the change that it is. This is a new way for us to be productive, a new way for us to work, a new way for us to add to the productivity of our team. It can be an easier adjustment for those who aren't comfortable or are intimidated for it. And by the way, it can be a new adjustment and an easier adjustment for those who feel like they're seasoned. You're not telling them what they've been doing is wrong. We're just creating something new here. And so some specifics, tips for you that you might try. So you may have already, by the way, started to establish some of these prepare from work from home materials, notes for your teams, et cetera. But to the extent you can, think about these as best practices. Number 1, being proactively transparent. So just live with the fact that you're going to see a reduction in communication in the short term. Your team may be new. They may be adjusting to life at home. They may be adjusting to, quite frankly, all of the changes that are going on in the world right now. And your current culture may be, quite frankly, if you want to know something, ask, right? Drop by my office, pop into my cube, send me an email. We're an open door society here, all of that kind of thing. And you may say, just ask. We need to switch this, especially as leaders of our remote team. It's really important that you be proactively transparent. Don't let people's imagination or, quite frankly, side conversations through text messaging rule the day. Address tough conversations, the change, the new, all of the things that you want to address with your team proactively, right up front, building that trust with your team as they're starting to adjust to this new world. Through the written communication, through your team meetings, have those conversations when you can. 2, establish training or, if you like, socialization programs of this new world. So whether you design them yourself or you bring in a coach or a consultant or a trainer, invest the time and or the dollars to make sure your team is adjusting well to this new world. That doesn't have to be some college level curriculum or a 5-level class or anything like that. But I know you got to get work done, but invest in them and make sure that they're understanding the new tools, the technology, the new ways of approaching the behaviors, how to set up their office, how to set up their private space, all of those things, and helping them adjust and getting coached will be really, really beneficial to you in the long run. 3, to the extent you can, maintain your existing hierarchy and your relationships. Everybody's internet avatar is the same size. And so really it's important here. It's tempting because everybody wants to sort of invite everybody to every meeting or, be proactively transparent. So just make sure everybody's on every call or that the digital channels are the same communication channels. So let's CC the boss on everything. resist that urge. Figure out the right hierarchies, your corporate culture, and apply them to this new virtual world. When it might not have been as easy to get an audience with the boss, it shouldn't be a lot easier in the virtual world. Proactive communication aside, maintain those hierarchies and those relationships, because they're important to maintain sanity, not just for you, but for the team itself. And that brings us to 4, which is establish more iterative workflows and check-ins. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on Thursday when we talk about some of the tools that you might do to actually facilitate some of these frequent check-ins and new workflow patterns. But whether you bring in a coach to do this, or you bring in, just someone who actually knows how to do this, I know some of you are already exploring, agile methods, sprints, those kinds of things in the physical world. But this becomes even more important when we get to this new virtual and remote team management. The natural tendency here is to want to basically issue clear directions and feedback for the team, have as few meetings as possible, not overdo people with calls and video calls and all of those kinds of things in this work remote environment. And so what that ends up being is the calls themselves become really long. Emails become really long. Documents become really long. And what happens is that you start to establish this pattern maybe of a weekly email. So you start issuing this 3,000 word email to your team every week that says, here are the priorities for the week. Here's what we should be working on. We'll check in on Friday and see how everybody's doing. Guess which email is going to be the most hated email in about three weeks? Rather, try and establish a new workflow for your projects and implement more frequent check-ins based on tasks completed. Yes, this means more communications, but hopefully it means shorter, quick touch points, check-ins, iterative check-ins. I'll give you an example of this. So my team is often working on really big consulting projects and deliverables that are collaborative in nature. And they may take 3 or 4 of us working on it at any one time. Now, somebody may have taken a first shot at it, or as we move into the collaborative stage, it may be more frequent. But even when we're in the sort of heads down work mode, we assign tasks and we check in daily. We have a quick, stand up to say, how's everybody doing? What's going on? Even twice a day sometimes when we move into the fast iteration, just to monitor progress and, quite frankly, just check in, just touch heads, just be able to say, I see you. And even if it's to say, everything's good, I'm working on it, and we'll continue on. And that brings us to our next best practice, number 2, which is manage the work and lead the worker. So as we mentioned before, this is different, right? It's a different kind of remote work. And because of that, your productivity, again, in the short term, may suffer a little bit. Now, it may not, right? You may be blessed to have a team that wants immediately to immerse themselves into the work and truly be shut outside of the chaos and all of that. But in either case, as you start creating and leading these remote teams, what you're going to find is that natural patterns at the individual level are going to start to emerge as they start to adjust to this new world. And the key is to grow as a leader and let the team grow where possible to leverage this to your advantage. See, what I mean by that is you got the work from home and the remote work idea and the immediate notion of sort of lifting out the pattern from our physical world into the virtual world is just natural. But there really is no such thing as staying late or putting in the hours, when you're working in this remote environment. Availability is going to be put to the test. Time zones, quite frankly, personal life, and right now the emergency life is going to get in the way of your remote teams. Now, there's exceptions to this for sure. Like, I understand if many of you manage teams that, you're bound by hours that you have to be available for customer service, or you've got client service or support teams that have to be available for a certain time period in a certain time zone. But what I'm talking about here is breaking yourself free and watching for the natural patterns of your team that are outside the bounds and patterns of what happens in the physical world. What I mean is we get very often locked into this familiarity of the 8 to 5 schedule with a break at noon to 1 for lunch, everyone gathering from 2 to 4 for the all hands meeting, the HR policies meeting at 4 o'clock, et cetera, et cetera. These are the patterns that are going to get immediately broken by people and by your team. So the long-term savvy remote workers, what ends up happening is you start integrating the work life into your home life. You may work all day Sunday and then take your kids to the park on Monday morning. Now, you're not taking your kids to the park right now, but ultimately, when you can start getting out, you start integrating the more balanced work and home life into those remote working situations. As the virtual leader of one of those things, what I want you to think about is, one, establishing clear rules of the road or flexibilities for work times and patterns where you need them, but B, monitoring your team members as they adjust and start to learn their patterns and correcting those workflows because of it. Give me an example of this. So you may have somebody who, this is one of my pet peeves, by the way, but it's somebody, you may have someone like this who operates in what I call offline mode. So they'll go quiet. They don't respond to email. They don't respond to Slack messages. They don't respond to text during the day. And then all of a sudden at 4:35 p.m., you get a flurry of emails responding to everything, Slack messages, document dumps into the shared repository, status updates, responding to every little thing. And this leaves the rest of the team a little frustrated, quite frankly, because they've just had this big day where they've iterated and worked and they're ready to take the rest of the day off. And this one guy has now dumped everything on their desk at 5 o'clock, and it just weighs on people's emotions. So our normal inclination is to say, okay, let's set the rules, and everybody's got to be doing 8 to 5 at their desks, be responsive to messages, be on every call. And doing that, setting those draconian rules, is a quick way to build an unengaged remote work team. What we want to focus on here, to the extent possible, is the work. Is the work being done smoothly? Then ask if we need to change behaviors or we can modify the workflow to accommodate. So for example, on the positive side, we want the work done. So if somebody can accomplish that in 2 hours and then take their kid to the park, fantastic. That should maybe be okay. If someone is dumping work at midnight because they really love to work from 6 to midnight, maybe that's okay too. It just depends on whether or not our team and our workflow match up with that. Ask yourself if you can leverage that to meet your workflow. Some of these new patterns, quite frankly, may work to your advantage, especially as it pertains to time zones. So, some specific things to think about. One, establish those rules of the road for work. Document them. Now, this may be difficult at first, but it will be worth the effort. In Thursdays, we're going to talk about the team charter, a remote team charter, and how you might create that team charter and structure it that can document some of these things. As a team, have a discussion about the limitations, the flexibilities, the preferences for working remotely as you set up all of these things. Figure out which ones can be flexed or leveraged, and figure out which ones can be taken advantage of. Give you a great example. My remote team, I have a team of 6 on my team right now. They live in Portland, Toronto, New York, and Germany. Now, I absolutely leverage the time zone differences for the projects we work on and the way that we manage that workflow. However, our team meeting is highly structured, always at the same time, same day, and that's different, obviously, times for those. It's early morning for us on the West Coast. It's sort of mid-morning to early afternoon for the East Coast, and then, of course, evening time for Europe. 2, establish the boundaries for the team, not the team members. It's really, really, you'll want to think about this, because just because you can email or Slack or text somebody at 6 a.m. their time does not necessarily mean you should expect a response, nor should that other team member. And PTO, when we start thinking about the long term here, PTO is really, basically it's time off. So it should be respected as time off, even in this remote world. And basically resist the urge, because I promise you the urge will be there. Even when it's beneficial for you to make the change, really resist the urge to make a change for someone on the team, right? So for example, everybody except Joe or Mary can get emails on weekends. No, it's a team, basically, to the extent you really can, focus in on the team dynamic, not individual exceptions or individual rules. And lastly here, care less about 9 to 5. Generally speaking, I want you to care, but care a little less, unless your business, of course, warrants it and you have to really care about those availability hours, and time tracking. I'm not saying not to time track. In many cases, you have to time track. And in many cases, it's really beneficial to time track. But to the extent you can, resist the idea of instituting time spent for project and accountability measures rather than for how the work is getting done, especially if you're not in the business of billing by the hour, or you're creating data that measures that effort. But if you're thinking about things like, well, I need to get keylogger technologies or tracking people's behavior, or I need to make sure, you've seen the memes going around of people attaching, cycle fans to their mouse to make sure that their work. If you're having to do that for your team, then you really need to rethink your culture for a remote team management. And then finally, for today's webinar, is establishing your remote technology stack. Because once you've got these processes figured out, once you've got these dynamics figured out, and you start to figure out the patterns, now we need to facilitate those things with technology. And so when you think about technology, you may not have a lot of choice here. Your IT team may be already selecting things for you, or they may have already selected things for you that help you work those things. The key here is establishing the standard, and quite frankly, more importantly, is the approach that you take with your team to technology. So for example, right now, you may, in the physical office, you may collaborate on documents by simply passing them around on an email. And you can pop by somebody's cube and go, hey, remember, can you send me that email, email me that document, right? Or if you basically, say, hey, I'm going to drop it into the shared thing and I'll send you an email, and et cetera. But now all those patterns are changed. And when you say, okay, we're going to share a document, does that mean we're passing it around via email, or we're dropping it on the Dropbox or SharePoint server? Or am I going to text you a link to it? Or am I going to Slack you a link to it? Or am I just going to phone you up and say, basically, here it is, go get it? Figure out those communication approaches and the right technology for the right application, and stick to it. So for example, we use GoToMeeting right now for our remote team and video ideas. We're moving to Microsoft Teams because, quite frankly, Microsoft Teams has really improved in quality. So we're making a move there, but the GoToMeeting is our standard. It's what we use to meet with everybody, clients, ourselves. We hold our virtual meetings, video or otherwise, there. Our note taking for interviews, for meeting notes, for all of that is done in, we do that in Evernote, and we use that shared. Our documents is through Dropbox. We use the Microsoft Suite for our creation tools. And then we use Skype for telephoning each other one-on-one. Now, all of those things have different chat functions, different ways of doing it, but we've set the standard, like when you want to chat with somebody, you're going to do it through Skype right now. You're not going to do it through Microsoft Teams or GoToMeeting or anything like that, because that's where people are expected to respond to the instant messaging and chat. This may be, quite frankly, the most slippery thing you deal with, is getting people to really comply with the way that technology should work. So some specific things, and then we'll get to some Q&A here. When we think about this, one, again, understand the limits of your team. So beyond collaboration, you need to have a really good grasp on your team's current limits. Do they have good cell coverage? Do they have the right hardware? Do they have the right laptops, tablets, et cetera, and the software that you're going to need? So start building slowly your tech stack. Again, on Thursday, we'll talk a bit about an approach about how to select the right technology. But with your IT team or a consultant or a freelancer or somebody you trust, work to somebody and understand the best ways for you to facilitate some of those processes and workflows that you've now created. That's the real key here. There is no more walking down two cubes and sort of asking your office mate for something. You'll need to have the ability for doing those chats, doing those things with the technology. So hardware, that includes headsets for your team, laptops, cell phones, project management software, document creation software, communication, workflow, project management, et cetera. And yeah, I'll say it again, training, making sure that the technology and your team is trained on it. The biggest impediment, and it's become a meme now on the internet, which is virtual meeting, conference calls, and all of that not working, and the technology not working in the way it's supposed to. Do we have to train people not to send 50 megabyte files in email? Do we have to train people on how to not have the dog running around, or not having, finding an isolated spot for meetings? But maybe the dog is cool. Maybe we're okay with that. Figure out what's right for your team, and figure out your team charter and get the training so that everybody's on it. If there's only one person who knows how to start a Zoom meeting, that's a problem, because if that person's not available for the Zoom meeting, then we can't meet and work doesn't get done. So quickly closing up here, I wanted to have this for you. This is something just so you'll know you're going to get when we ultimately send you this. This is a segmentation of tools with links. These are not affiliate links. There's no sort of bias here or anything like that. They're in alphabetical order. And so they're basically just links to all the different kinds of tools that you may want to explore for your virtual team. And I hope it's a good start for you on that idea. Just in quick closing here, I wanted to just close up with one of my favorite mentors in business, the late, unfortunately, Clayton Christensen. And one of the things he said, I think, is really important in this new world. And he said, understanding a problem is the most crucial step in solving it. Whenever we're going to go through any disruptive change in the world, we have to ask ourselves if we understand the actual problem we're solving for. So it's common when we think about remote work, our immediate thinking is going to go to, how do we produce the work we do today, the quality, and duplicate the environment we have today? Don't look at it that way. What we like to say, ultimately, our sort of mantra is content is communication. Basically, we say this every day to ourselves because the biggest role of the virtual team leader is a communicator. One of our clients said it really well after being a remote team manager for about 5 years. She said, if I had to go back in time and do it all again and relearn one thing, it's that being a remote employee, and especially the leader of a remote team, it's all about communicating. They, meaning her team, should never wonder what's going on with the rest of the team. All the stuff that they use to do that, to catch up, the elevator chats, all of that, it's not there anymore. If anybody is going, what's going on? Then we're not living up to our standard. So ultimately, we find being a virtual team lead is about getting really good at creating communication, the content that keeps your team engaged, flowing, productive, and ultimately profitable for the company. In a physical space, almost everything is shared verbally. In the remote situation, almost everything is going to get shared via written communication. And so you got to encourage people to get really good at this, train them on this as well. And we'll talk about that on Thursday for sure. And we'll also talk about on Thursday some of the specific things you can do to get engaged over the long term. Virtual leaders are communicators and they're content creators, quite frankly. And you can get good at both, and your team can get great at all of this, and quite frankly, produce even better work than you're producing. So just to sum up, 1, proactively transparent, establish the new iterative ways of working. 2, establish clear rules of the road and flexible work times and patterns. Monitor those teams for the patterns that will adjust and be advantageous for you. And 3, build a smart tech stack, but more importantly, build a smart approach to the use of technology and make no assumptions about your team's readiness for this. Get them trained as they need to. So I hope we have some time for some Q&A here. This is and talk a little bit more about what it is you're dealing with. And I will try as best I can here to put myself back on video, and we can do a little bit of Q&A here. Thanks so much, by the way, for participating today. I really, really appreciate it.
Robert, thank you so much on behalf of the nearly 500 people we had logging on to watch and listen. Really, really appreciate your insight. And I've been keeping track of a couple of questions and some themes. For everybody that's still listening, we'll go a little bit longer. I want to be respectful of your time. And as I said at the beginning, you will get an email inviting you to Thursday, and after Thursday's conversation, whether you watch it or not, you will get a link to the landing page where all of this information will be stored. One of the questions coming right out of the gate, Robert, is how do you keep your team morale up and motivated through this transition into the new world of remote working?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's sort of 2 parts to that question, which is 1, how do you keep your team's morale up when you're dealing with something like we're dealing with right now? And then, of course, how do you keep your team morale up when they have to do the sort of, the work, right? When we got to actually focus on the work, which can sometimes be hard and difficult. And what we have found, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on Thursday when we talk about some of the tools that we've been, and by tools, by the way, we don't necessarily mean technology. We will talk about technology, but tools meaning sort of frameworks and documents that really, and meetings that have really helped us. One of them that is truly helpful is not just meeting because it's, there's a deliverable due, or there's a, announcement to make or whatever. I'll be honest. I worked with one client where we were working remotely. It was a long-term client, and every single time I would see a meeting announcement from them, when I would get that meeting announcement, my heart would sink. Because I knew it was somehow going to be bad news. Something from corporate was going to go on. If they were announcing a virtual meeting, it was something, negative, or somebody was getting laid off, or somebody left the company. I just knew it. And of course, it always was. We need to establish patterns where not only are we creating productivity through those meetings, but we're also having fun, socializing, Taco Tuesday, Wine Wednesday, all of those things are still active. And one of the things that we'll talk about on Thursday is, quite frankly, you can also incorporate the physical into that. One of the things that we've done is we've done wine parties where what I'll do is I'll send a bottle of wine to all my team in advance, and we'll all drink it together on a Zoom. And it's just a wonderful way to sort of keep the socialization up and also celebrate each other's wins. And we'll also, when we talk about the team charter and the gratitude meetings, we'll also talk about some of that as well on Thursday.
Thank you. Next question up is, how do you manage the reality of this new workspace with kids, pets, partners, spouses, roommates, etc.? How do you make it all work, since it's a non-professional environment for business now to be conducted?
Yeah, it's a really difficult balance, especially where you don't have the ability to move, right? And so I've seen a couple of memes going around where, we're all starting to get to that place, especially when where both partners in the house are working, or when multiple partners in the house are working and have to share the space for virtual meetings and for webinars and those sorts of things. And many of us don't have the luxury of, quite frankly, having separate rooms or garages or places where we can go and set those things up. And having the distraction of kids or dogs, et cetera, I think there's two things that are important. One is having some period of time of adjustment and helping those team members establish what it is that's going to work for the team. In other words, for example, one of our team members, she's got like 5 dogs. And we just, it's one of those things that we've just built into our workflow, is the fact that she's going to get interrupted by the dogs because people are going to knock at her door and the dogs are going to go nuts. And it's almost become a running joke now, where as soon as we hear the doorbell ring, everybody hits mute, right? Because that's just the way it is. We have to adjust as well for these folks who are in these unfortunate and unavoidable circumstances where kids are going to get, interrupt. We may have to have a baby on our lap as we have a virtual meeting. We may have to have dogs around. We may get interrupted. And really the key is twofold. One is helping those people adjust to the extent you can, training, help with technology, help with, helping them, set up isolated spaces and scheduling when it might be advantageous. And also the second part of that is adjusting our workflows to accommodate those things at the team level. That's so it's that communication that's really important here. And so finding out what it is that actually helps you adjust to the production of work, rather than sort of looking at it as a distraction. It's really no different than the same things that we would have to schedule around or work in the physical environment. We have corporate meetings, and hey, the other team is going to have a pizza party and it's going to be loud for the next, couple of hours. And oh, by the way, you can't use the coffee machine because they have a highfalutin meeting that's going on and the coffee machine will be out for. We make adjustments all the time in the physical space, and we just need to make those same physical adjustments in the virtual space.
Great. Really, really appreciate it. I think we got time for 2 more. The next one is really interesting in that it's kind of a 2-part question. How do you position more frequent check-ins with your team so that you don't come across as micromanaging, so that you can keep them engaged? And also, how can you do that in a way to focus on breaking down silos versus encouraging?
That's a great question. Love that question. So the key is that one, the sort of the more frequent check-ins. Again, I encourage you to position them as this is a new way, right? So it may be actually physically, literally a new way for you to interact, or it may be, quite frankly, doing you may already be doing frequent check-ins in the physical world, but now it's sort of through virtual technology. So in either case, position it, one, as this is a new way that we're operating. The new way of operating gives you and the recipient of that, because what the recipient is hearing when you're saying, I want to do more frequent check-ins, I want to, sort of iterate more quickly, et cetera. If they're hearing that you're micromanaging them, et cetera, what we're doing is that we're saying this is somehow different, and what you've been doing is wrong, and we're actually going to fix that because we can't police you. That's what they're hearing. So what we have to do is position it rather with the team as saying, this is a new way. We're all in this together. This is a new way to be productive. You're all super fantastic, wonderful, et cetera. But in order for us to work most effectively, maybe not even efficiently, but effectively, what we need to do is do frequent check-ins and basically really just make sure that we're flowing in the same direction, because we don't have that physical ability to see each other or to talk, et cetera. This is an idea of talking and checking in more frequently, a new way of sort of managing productivity. Secondly, and I saw somebody on the chat say one of the things they do is they Slack each other and tell each other a joke. Getting back to that idea that not all check-ins have to be all business, right? Making sure that you're just checking in not only on the task that needs to get done, not only on what their status is for a cross-functional team that you need information on, but also how you doing? What's going on? Let me tell you a joke. Let me just introduce. So every time they see your request for a check-in, or every time they see a Slack or a text message or an email from you saying, hey, I want to do a quick 10-minute or a 15-minute check-in, they're not going, I know what this is going to be, and I have to prepare for it, and I have to get ready for it. It's basically just working into the patterns that the goal isn't to dive deep into these check-ins. The goal is to just quickly get a red light, green light, yellow light, and make sure they're okay. Make sure everybody's informed. It's just a more frequent way of communicating, not necessarily checking up on their progress toward a task.
Great. One of the things that I managed to do with the team here that I'm managing is check in with them, and again, see how they're doing and what's going on, but also being respectful of the fact that parents of children have to prepare class plans. They have to get lunch ready for them. They're in a brave new world as well, and I alter my expectations accordingly to make sure that they feel that they've got the time to accomplish the tasks as parents and partners that they need to. So one last question, which is sort of my favorite only because of the topic. The question is, what do you recommend, or how would you recommend a respectful and delicate way to approach generational differences with regards to people's comfort with remote tools and technology, i.e., how do you get a dinosaur to adapt?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. And you're no dinosaur, Adam. Let's just be clear about that.
You're kind.
But it's a great question. And by the way, this isn't an age thing, right? This can be, quite frankly, people that, I know plenty of people who do not want to be, by the way, yours truly included here, who do not like being on video, who don't like, video calls, don't want to show their face on video, don't want to, resist the urge to use things like Slack or use things like, text messaging, and really want to rely on their old habits. And again, this comes back to working with your team and making team ideas, team decisions. And it's a critical thing here. We're not making a decision based on you, Adam, or one of our older compatriots, unless we want to, right? Unless we say, okay, you know what? He doesn't have a camera. He does not comfortable with a camera. So you know what? When we do Zoom sessions, he's not going to be on video. To the extent possible, again, we want to make a team decision on that. But also to the extent possible, we want to help that person understand the importance of evolving into the things that we need to evolve into. And most of the time, I find, like me, I may have come kicking and screaming a little bit into the video thing, but I'm actually, now that I finally found some good equipment and I figured out some good lighting, actually, I'm actually starting to enjoy it a lot more. And so there's an education component for sure. There's a phasing in or an evolution of it for sure. Maybe not today, but next month, George, we're going to make sure that, you get a good camera. We're going to teach you how to use it, all of that. And three, there's an adoption curve for us as a team and the individual within it that I think that I think you'll benefit from. So it's not a, push them into the pool and see if they swim. It's basically, how do we make decisions as a team that help the team and ultimately bring those people in as we can.
Great. Again, thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate and respect the tremendous amount of engagement that we've gotten, and quite a large number of questions. We will do our best to go through the questions offline and provide you with answers. We will tie them to the landing page that you'll be invited to, so that you'll
Absolutely.
get some answers to your questions. Please join us on Thursday. Robert will dig a little deeper into specific technologies and additional tips and management styles. So thank you for joining us on our first part of this series. We look forward to seeing you back on Thursday. Everybody have a great week, and let's stay safe and let's stay healthy.
See you soon.